Hello, and welcome back to the Nourish with Purpose podcast. It's Bailey, and I hope you're having a great Wednesday or whenever you're listening to today's episode. Today's episode is really me sharing my birth story, my birth experience, some about postpartum, really how I'm recovering, all the things in between. It's really interesting. When I was thinking about this episode, I was just kind of thinking about okay, would I want to listen to somebody's birth story? Would I really want all the nitty-gritty details? And it's funny because I used to feel the exact same way about weddings. I wanted to watch everybody's wedding video. I wanted to know all the details about people's weddings, even people that I didn't really know, people on the internet. I would even watch YouTube videos of people's, just their whole wedding, right? And then now I've noticed I'm a little less interested in that. Obviously, with my friends, it's a totally different story, but I'm not really actively searching to look at people's weddings, but I'm actively searching to hear and watch people's birth. I just think it's so fascinating. And again, it's the season of life I'm in, so it makes sense that it's something that I want to watch and see, and it makes me very emotional to see people's birth experience or hear about it, especially when it's very well documented, which is not what I did. I did not need cameras, videos, anything in the delivery room with me, but I do think it's really cool, and it's something that's very special when you are able to have that. So it's probably an episode for the gals, just in total transparency. I'm not going to obviously share anything that is too TMI or not appropriate, obviously, but it's just, if you've been through it, you can't always anticipate everything that's going to happen, and you kind of just get to a point where you're I don't care what people see in that region, it's whatever. You kind of lose all of that care. You're if these people are making this their occupation, obviously they don't care, and you just kind of I don't know, it's just really interesting. You just kind of stop caring what people see at that point when you're in labor. So again, I'm not going to share anything too personal, but I'm going to be very honest. And hopefully, if you are pregnant right now, this is encouraging and exciting for you. It is just an intense experience, and I don't want to be not honest about that. They always say it's the most pain you'll ever be in. And granted, yes, it's not comfortable. I shouldn't say that it wasn't painful, because it was. But at the same time, it's something you should still be excited about. And I really want to hone in on that is if you are pregnant or expecting, or if you want to have kids in the future, I do not want this to be anything that scares you. With my story, I don't want to intimidate you or make you feel intimidated by what you're about to enter into, because again, just know everybody's birth experience is so different, which is honestly the most wild thing to me, is how thousands of years women have been having babies, but it's not down to an exact science, because everybody's body is a little different. Everybody's experience is a little different. So just know this is my experience, and I'm going to share from my experience, but I don't want this to be anything that scares you or makes you maybe scared to have a baby, because it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And that's what every mother will tell you, or almost hopefully every mother will tell you, is that everything that you go through is absolutely worth it. And it is the second that you have that baby, it's just your whole world changes for the better. And I think that's something I didn't really expect, is to genuinely love being a mom so much, and just to love a person so much. It obviously makes me emotional, because you have a husband that you love so much, you have parents that you love so much, and grandparents and family, and even for me, I have a dog that I love so much, and it's you have this baby and your heart just wants to explode. That's all I know how to explain it as. I told Nathan, I'm my heart literally feels it's gonna explode, because I'm just so happy. And so all of that to say, again, it's all so worth it. But I did have some, a question box on my Instagram for Q&A, because there are just some questions that I wanted to answer if you were interested in hearing about them. So I'm going to start by just sharing about the whole experience, and then I will go through these questions and see if there's anything that I didn't feel I maybe addressed. So I'm kind of skipping the intro of today's episode. Nate actually took Oliver to get our Walmart pickup, and so I know they'll be home shortly, and I wanted to get this episode recorded, but not obviously take too much of my time with him, because I do love the podcast. Like I share all the time. I love it, and this is a great outlet for me, and I want to continue to share every week on the podcast, but episode lengths and durations and what I talk about is probably just going to be very relevant to what I'm going through in the moment. So it's kind of fun that way. But let's kind of back up. We're just going to get into it to Sunday. So this was Sunday the 10th. And I had gone to a bridal shower and it was really fun. It was great, obviously. And then that evening, I actually started feeling like I maybe had the stomach flu. And so I was thinking, I'm like, maybe I ate something that didn't really sit well. Maybe, I'm just like, I don't know. Maybe I was with somebody that was sick. And so on Monday, then I woke up and kind of had stomach flu symptoms, like coming out of both ends type of symptoms, which is, I know, not fun to think about, but I really do think is part of God's design. And I'll kind of explain that a little bit more about a couple things when it comes to bowel movements, which I know might seem like, why would God care about that, or how our body functions when it comes to that? But I really do think there's a reason. So anyway, I woke up on Monday and just felt like trash. So Nathan was like, maybe you should call the midwife clinic. We've been working with it's a certified nurse midwives, I think is how they pronounce it. Anyway, it's through the hospital that we went through, but they have a midwife clinic. And so I called them and I just wanted to make sure, like, if I was throwing up or other things were happening, that the baby was at least safe. Like, that was my number one concern, is like, I just want my baby to be safe and that this isn't like a scary or an alarming sign that this is happening to me. And they're like, well, maybe it would be like the norovirus that's really going around right now, but you're also pretty close to your due date. And I had texted my mom and she's like, I think this is a sign of labor. Like, I really think that this might be, your body just kind of like preparing to go into labor. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't get sick that often, but I really just like felt awful. And so I also was like, I didn't want Nate anywhere near me because I didn't want him to get sick. I'm like, well, if I'm going into labor and I have the stomach flu, like, I need him there with me. So I cannot get sick. I can't get him sick. Or not that I can't get sick. I was sick. I can't get him sick. I didn't want him to obviously experience what I was experiencing. And so that Monday, I just felt awful all day. Again, ate barely anything, drank barely anything. Oddly enough, a Coca-Cola sounded so good to me. And I probably haven't had pop in 3+ years. Like, and I shouldn't say 100% that that's true, but like, I don't drink pop regularly. But I texted my mom. I'm like, do you have like a Coca-Cola in your fridge? Because I really, really want one. And she's like, oddly enough, yeah, like in the back of our fridge, you'll find one. So Nathan went to my parents and picked that up and brought it back for me. And it was just the weirdest craving. I'm like, why do I want this? So then, of course, like, you get on Google and you're like, why am I craving a Coca-Cola and I have the stomach flu? And it was like, well, people with norovirus, it was like some viral thing on TikTok, really are noticing that Coca-Cola makes them feel better. So I'm like, okay, yeah, it's just a stomach flu. I'm fine. I'm in the clear. Well, then I went to bed that night and I was sleeping on the couch, and about 4 a.m. I wake up and I started having contractions, at least like what I assumed them to be contractions. And so I was just kind of timing them in my head, because the midwives were saying, like, you kind of follow like the 5-1-1 rule. So contractions are 5 minutes apart for 1 minute in length for 1 hour. And that kind of tells you, like, okay, it's time to head to the hospital. So I was laying on the couch about 4 a.m. and I was just counting. I'm like, okay, my contractions are about 30 seconds. They were going, I was saying like 3 to 5 minutes apart. Really, they were like 7 minutes apart. But nonetheless, I went to our bedroom then and told Nathan, I'm like, hey, I'm having contractions, nothing to freak out over, but I really think like that's what's happening. And so he was like, oh, okay. So he got up and like took a shower, got ready, and then he's like, okay, well, let's actually like time this to like see how close your contractions are actually, and see if like we need to be heading to the hospital. So when he actually timed them, he's like, okay, they're like, I don't know, 50 seconds long, and they're about 7 to 9 minutes apart. And then I would have a span where they'd be like 20 minutes apart. And then, so like I basically had contractions all day from 4 a.m. until 9 p.m. Well, later than that, but we headed to the hospital then because it was about an hour away, around like 8. And so all day really just had contractions. They were like pretty intense. Looking back, I would say pretty mild compared to the contractions when you're 7 centimeters to 10 centimeters dilated. These contractions felt pretty mild looking back, but in the moment, like it was pretty intense, and they just kind of progressed in length, and then they also got closer together. And so around 8 o'clock is when Nathan called the midwife clinic and was like, hey, she's having contractions. This is kind of how close they are together. Should we head in? And they told us that the midwife on call was really the one that we wanted. And so Nathan was like, yes, like, because he just knew how happy I would be that we got the midwife that we wanted, which there are 4 different midwives that we could have had. And they just obviously rotate who's on call. And I really think it was like just such a God thing, because when we initially met with this midwife, we were like, we both just left the appointment feeling very calm. She just is so knowledgeable and just, I don't know, made us feel very, very comfortable. Like somebody that I just like immediately felt trust with. And so we were so excited that she was the one that then would be the one who delivered Oliver. And so around 8 o'clock, like I said, we headed in, and I should backtrack. I was actually supposed to have an appointment that Tuesday when I started having contractions at 8 a.m. in Lincoln, which is the city that the hospital is in that we were going to deliver at. And we called and we're like, yeah, Bailey's having contractions. We're just not going to come in. We'll probably see you later today. So then, 8 p.m. came and we headed to the hospital. It's really interesting too how, at least this was for me, I was not hungry. Like I ate lunch and I felt fine. I didn't have any of like the stomach flu symptoms anymore on Tuesday, but it came time for supper and I'm like, I don't know. I can't do it. It's just interesting how like your body has the energy reserves to literally have a child, but I mean, I hadn't eaten for hours, and my body had plenty of energy to deliver a baby, which is just so crazy how our body is engineered to do that. And kind of going back to getting sick on Monday, I really do think that is part of God's design, is that your body relieves anything in it and kind of cleanses it out, honestly, to make room for, delivering a baby as it's obviously like working its way down towards your pelvis. I mean, it might already be there. Like the positioning obviously is going to be different, but like, I don't know, just like how my organs and everything were shifting and moving around and like fully kind of like emptying. Again, I know it's kind of weird to think like, do we think that God really thought about that? And I really do think he did, because I've heard a lot of women say like, oh my gosh, like I had similar symptoms, but I didn't even correlate it to going into labor. And so I would be interested too, like if you have had a baby and you had something similar happen, because I'm realizing it's a lot more common than I thought it was to have stomach flu symptoms before you actually go into labor. And again, I do think it's part of our design. And so we went to the hospital then. The interstate actually was shut from one of the exits on to Lincoln. And so we had to get off when we were on a highway, and it didn't really add any time to our drive, nor were Nathan and I very stressed. Like I really was not worried that I would be having this baby on the side of the interstate or the side of the highway. My contractions were intense, but it was still something I'm like, I just don't think this baby's like ready, so I just felt fine with the drive. I think we really timed it well, because I was able to, experience contractions for over 12 hours at home, and obviously kind of like labor at home. I feel most comfortable in my house. So of course, like that was ideal for me. And then we headed to the hospital. We got there, and I would honestly say like once we got into the hospital, my contractions got way more intense. It's kind of like my body, I think, signaling like you're safe. Like, not that I wouldn't have been safe in the car delivering a baby, but you know what I mean? Like my body's like, okay, you're in a place where these people can help you. If anything's to happen, like we can finally like progress this on. And so we walked up to the floor where like the labor and delivery floor, had to fill out some paperwork. Obviously was having contractions kind of like in between that. And then they brought us into a room just to check like how dilated I was. And I was 6 to 7 centimeters dilated when our midwife came in to check. And she's like, oh my gosh, like you're going to have a baby today or tonight. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like we're actually doing this. It was just crazy. I'm like, if I would have not been that far along, having contractions at 4 a.m. and honestly not sleeping for, it felt like about 2 days. Because when you're sick, you don't really sleep that well either. I was like, we're just going to get a hotel if that's the case and just stay here because I am not going to go home and then come back later. We're going to have this happen. And so she had come in too and she was like, we could also break your water. I just wanted to let you know that's an option. Still obviously a natural way to deliver, but it could progress things along. And in that moment, I was like, honestly, if like it means I'm that much closer to meeting my baby, like I didn't care. I'm like, yeah, honestly, let's do that. And I'm like, but I mean, can you guarantee that like it will speed things up? She's like, I can't guarantee that, but it's a good way to tell if labor in the future will be fast for you if your water breaks. And it really did progress from there pretty quickly. So from there, they moved me into the actual delivery room. I guess I didn't preface this, but we did have a hospital delivery. And that was something I honestly will say I was kind of hesitant about. And I would honestly also say I didn't really want. The options in Nebraska are pretty limited. I really wanted to deliver at the birthing center, but they were no longer able to do that just because some like policies or laws changed in Nebraska, or maybe with the hospital that then didn't allow them to actually have deliveries at the center. And so I was honestly very disappointed in that and wanted to have a delivery at the birthing center, but we ended up obviously being in the hospital. And something that I want to say on that too, if like that is your option or your only option, or if you're in labor and you're planning to deliver at home, but you have to be brought to the hospital, I've really had a wonderful, wonderful experience like in that environment. And I told Nathan, I don't think I would want to deliver outside of the hospital setting, not because I feel like delivering at home would be unsafe or that, I don't know. There's just like so many things that they know that I don't know. And I feel like I did a lot of research beforehand to like, okay, if I'm going to have this baby on the interstate, like what do I look for? What do I do? But and I'll share kind of like when he actually came out too about like what all happened, but just like how quick they are into action when things maybe don't happen as planned or as you were expecting, or when that baby comes out, like just to have people there that are like, okay, this is what we need to do. We need to get them on your chest. Oh, they swallowed some fluid. We need to make sure we get that out. Like it was just very reassuring to not have that pressure be on either me or my husband. And that's not to say you can't obviously deliver any way that you want to, in any way that you feel safe, I think is the best way for you to deliver, feel safe and feel comfortable. But for us, I'm like, I really don't think I would change anything about it. But coming back to then getting into the actual delivery room, I got into a robe, the quality hospital robes that are open in the back. And I started then obviously just like working through my contractions while I was there. They did then break my water and they had to put in an IV port, which was the one thing that I was honestly the most scared about during delivery. I did not want an IV port in. It just like the thought of it was disgusting to me. The feeling of it, I was so worried like when I'm clenching my fists like that I'm going to have an IV in my arm. Like that was honestly the one thing that I really, really, really did not want. But it is hospital policy for them to have to do that if they break your water, just kind of as, I don't know, I'm going to guess if you lost too many fluids, they'd be able to give you some fluids through the IV. And so after they did that, Nathan and I kind of sat there for a while. I'm like, do I want them to break my water? And I looked at Nathan. He's like, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Like, you can still make the decision that you want to make. And that was something I had communicated to him before, actually, is like, I know me and I don't know. I would say like under pressure of somebody who has authority, obviously like in a hospital, like with nurses or even like a midwife, like if they were telling me something was safe, like obviously I do believe that, but I also know that my opinion could be swayed by them being confident in doing something one way. And I would have a hard time maybe objecting to do that. So I told Nathan that I'm like, I do want you, like, this is what I want to happen. And I do want you to stand up for me if you feel like I'm like doing something because I feel pressured to do it. And so he was very much like, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. And I kind of like sat there. The nurse was like about to put it in. And I was like, wait a second. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, do I want to do this? Do I not? And I'm like, okay, yeah, like, let's just do it. So she put it in and the IV port in. And it was it wasn't so bad. But it was funny because then when she left the room, this guy also came in, and they didn't tell me that he'd be coming in to draw blood, but he came in and he didn't really say anything. And he's like, I'm here to draw blood. And Nathan and I like looked at each other. We're like, I guess this is supposed to be happening. So he came, drew blood. It didn't, honestly, all of that is like so mild compared to the contractions that you're having. It was like, whatever, just like take as many vials as you need. I'm assuming if you're coming into my room to do this, you were supposed to. Then the midwife came in shortly. She's like, I guess I should have warned you. He's going to come in to get blood, or like obviously draw blood. Just have to do that so we have it on record. I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. Totally fine. It was just kind of random and very funny in the moment where like this guy comes in, doesn't really say anything, draws my blood, and then leaves and doesn't really say anything. And Nathan and I just like looked at each other like, I guess that's what's supposed to be happening. I mean, I didn't obviously object. And so after that, like I said, Nathan and I kind of like walked around. The contractions were obviously getting more intense. I had somebody tell me that from 7 to 10 centimeters dilated, the contractions don't really get any worse. And I will tell you that that is not true in my experience. They got pretty intense pretty quickly. So much so, like my midwife was like, hey, do you like want to go walk? And I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Like, let's walk. She's like, oh my gosh, okay, sweet. So we went into the hallway and we're walking, and I got to a point and I'm like, I'm going to throw up. And Nathan was just so steady and sturdy the whole time, which was so good. I'm like, that's the one thing I really needed him to be, is just like very sturdy and not get grossed out by things happening and like truly be there to support me. And he did that so well. So I'm here like in the hallway and I felt so bad. I'm like, I am so sorry that I'm throwing up. And the midwife was like, I don't care. Like nobody here cares. We all know what you're doing and what you're going through. But I'm like, okay, but if people are in these rooms and they're hearing me hack outside of their room and they're in labor, like I just felt so bad. But the intensity was just getting to the point where I'm like, yeah, like there's like, this has to get out of me. Because when we got to the hospital, I hadn't eaten anything. And so I had some fruit leather, which I know sounds so random, but like little fruit leather strips. And I'm like, I'm going to have one of those because that would be really quick energy and I'm probably going to need it. And then that obviously all just came back up when I had just a very intense contraction. So then we started walking back to the room, and the nurse had said, she's like, you're going to know when it's time to push. And I didn't really believe that, like I really do believe everything is so instinctual, but in the moment she was like, let me know when you want me to start running the tub, because I really thought that I'd want to do a water birth. And then I was like, I don't even know when to ask for that. Like, I have no idea how fast this is going to go. I have no idea when I'm going to actually be ready to push. And you really do know when you're ready to push. Like, I got to a point where my midwife had us like had me in like different positions for like during the contractions. And then she had me laying on my side with like a peanut ball in between my legs. And she's like, this is really like a position that can speed things up and can, I don't know, just move things along. And that was really what I wanted, because my body was like shaking. And that was something Nathan didn't really expect. He's like, I didn't expect you to like physically be shaking, which is totally normal if that happens to you. There's a lot of things happening hormonally. For some people, it doesn't happen at all. For some women, it's after they deliver. Some people, it's during like when they're in active labor. For me, like I just like physically started shaking. Like your body just does that. I don't know. It's insane. It's honestly just, the whole experience is wild, but it's incredible. And our bodies are just so incredible. And it gives you so much more respect for your body when you see what it is able to do in that sense. So anyway, I was then in that position and having contractions, and then I was like, no, okay, I'm ready to push. Like I could sense it. And I think it's something I really encourage you, if you are pregnant, is like just to trust your instincts and not doubt yourself. Because honestly, as much as I wanted to believe this was an instinctual process, I really doubted my body. Sometimes I was like, I really don't think this should be happening. Like, I don't think I'm going to know when it's happening, or when it's time to go to the hospital, or when I'm ready to push. And like, you really do. You do know. And And so, like I guess I didn't mention this, but I didn't do an epidural or anything. I wanted it to be as low intervention as possible, or minimal intervention as possible. And so they would monitor the baby with like a handheld monitor, but I didn't have like a belly band on or anything to continuously monitor the baby. Every, I want to say 5 minutes maybe she did. The nurse monitored and like checked his heartbeat and made sure that everything was fine, and that it wasn't like dropping or spiking. And so that's why I think obviously the intensity of contractions was the way it was, is because I just didn't have any intervention. And I want to say too, like however you choose to deliver is 100% okay. I think there's kind of a movement of people wanting to deliver more naturally, or I shouldn't even say naturally. I like to say low intervention because delivering a baby is natural, like for all of us. It's a natural thing, but minimal intervention. So not using any like epidural or doing a C-section if you're able to not do that. Obviously, however you do it is totally fine. That was just what I wanted for myself. But the whole time I was having contractions, I will be honest, I was like, why wouldn't you do an epidural? I was like shaking, and like in between contractions, you feel so good. I was like, gosh, I feel so good. And then I'd have a contraction. I'd be like, why wouldn't I have done an epidural? But like, that's just kind of like that self-doubt playing in your mind. Like your body is so capable of doing this. Your body wouldn't be pushed to an extreme if it wasn't able to make it through that. It's just kind of in the moment. And so I was really focusing on breathing, and something my nurse was amazing. I could talk about her for a long time just because she was great. And she was like, keep your like grunts or your tones low. And so like when you're going through a contraction, instead of like screaming like you probably see on all the movies, you're supposed to actually keep the like vibration of your voice very low, rather than having that high pitch. I'm going to guess it's because it's contracting different muscles and probably impacting your pelvic floor, but that would just be a guess on my part. So anyway, I got into the moment where I was like, okay, ready to actively push. So I was in active labor. I think that's what you would call the span when you're pushing. Anyway, that was 45 minutes, and I'm super grateful that it was only 45 minutes. I know some people that have pushed for 2 hours. For me, I had a lot of coaching. I felt like my nurse was like, okay, tuck your chin into your chest and lean forward. And then actually like the midwife had like warm cloths and oil like in that region. So it gave me like a point to push down to. That's something I really tried to think about when I was in labor, is like, okay, I'm going to inhale, because you take a deep breath in, you exhale and you push. And when there was warmth in that area, it gave me a target to know like where I'm pushing the energy towards. And I really feel like I was able to like disengage or engage my pelvic floor when needed, because there was something in that area to like, again, like I said, push the energy towards. And so that was something that I really did like. And I loved that I was able to have, obviously, my midwife there. I think if you don't have a midwife and you're wanting to do something a little bit more like unmedicated, probably having a doula or hiring a midwife would be super helpful, just because I know they help with positioning if you're using like a typical OBGYN for delivery. In like the traditional hospital setting. So for me, I didn't feel like I needed a doula, because my midwife was very good at like coaching me through it, very encouraging. And honestly, the nurse that I had was also very encouraging, very good at coaching me through the whole experience. And so we got to a point then when his head was almost out, and she's like, do you want to touch his head? I was like, okay, whatever. So I touched it. She's like, oh my gosh, he has so much hair. And so I felt that, and I like just was smiling. And my midwife was like, oh my gosh, like you're at this point in labor and you're smiling. And I should also say too, we had a playlist going. I put together one on Spotify with a lot of like Christian songs that I thought were very encouraging and would be just good to listen to. And there was one song, and I can't remember exactly like what lyrics were playing, but it was when I was smiling after I'd like felt his head. It was just like such a surreal experience, and it played, and I'm like, this is so fitting. And I wish that I remembered what the exact lyrics were, because it was just like such a timing thing of like, I got to feel him for the first time like physically, and then had this song playing. It was just really neat. And obviously Nathan was there the whole time and just encouraging the whole time as well of like, you can do this. And I think the big point for me was when my nurse, and Nathan honestly was the one who recognized this. The nurse that was with us was my nurse, and then they called in another nurse to be Oliver's nurse, and then we have the midwife who is the one to like catch the baby in a sense. And so when my nurse had called the other nurse in, was like, hey, I think we're really close, you should probably come in here. I was like, okay, like we are getting close to the end. We know this is happening. We know he's about to be here. Like I can do this. And I think that's the hard part about labor is like you really don't know how many more pushes or cycles of pushes you have to go through. I was telling Nathan, I'm like, if they could have just said like, okay, 4 more times, like you have to do, 4 more pushes, I'd be like, okay, I can do that. But they can't because they really don't know either. So when she had actually called the nurse in, I was like, okay, like we are so close. I can do this. Like it's time. Like let's just hone in. And having Nathan there, obviously, like I said, was really big for me. I'm so glad that he was able to be there and he was strong the whole time. He's not really like a medically minded blood type of person. And so I was a little, I wouldn't say worried because I knew he would be fine, but he just stayed up by my face and just helped me through it. And I squeezed his hand so much. He had on his wedding ring and he was like, okay, I have to take this off for a second because it was like piercing his skin. But he was just such a supportive person, obviously, to be there. I kind of thought that I would maybe want more people there when I delivered. And looking back, like I'm really glad that it was something that him and I got to do together than obviously with the staff that was there too. So like I said, I pushed for 45 minutes. So kind of to give you a timeline, we got to the hospital around 9:15, 9:30 when we got checked in. And then I started pushing around, I would say like 1:45 a.m. And I pushed and then had Oliver at 2:32 a.m. And so, I really just pushed. And I shouldn't say I really just pushed. It was 45 minutes of pushing. And he came out and they set him right on my chest. And in my port, they had done some oxytocin, I want to say is what it was. She had said it was Pitocin, but that was not true because I could see like the little tag. And again, I wouldn't say like I was opposed to that. I think there's something really interesting that happens once you have a baby is like, I really did not care what they did to me to keep me, to keep things how they were supposed to be or to help my body recover. Like I know they do that to help minimize blood loss. And at that point, it was like, don't do anything to my child without, asking me. But for me, I'm like, whatever you have to do, like, I don't care, do it to me, but like, really don't do anything to my baby is how I felt. And so they placed him on my chest, but then he had swallowed some amniotic fluid when he came out. So they were like really patting on his chest. They kind of wiped him down a little. And then they are like, we do need to I should backtrack. Nathan then cut the cord, which I'm like, was so proud of him for. The midwife really didn't give him an option. She's like, all right, Dad, here you go. And he cut it. And then they're like, okay, we do need to take him, like make sure we get all of this fluid out of his lungs, or not out of his lungs, to make sure it doesn't get into his lungs. And so they took him and just like patted that out of him as much as they could. And then they placed him back on my chest. And then after that, I delivered my placenta. I did want to wait until my placenta stopped pulsing until they like cut the cord. And that is just a practice that the midwives do anyway. It wasn't something I specified in a birth plan at the hospital I was at. That was just their general procedure. But my placenta was actually aged. She's like, your placenta is actually very old. Like there was areas where it was calloused and looked very aged, which is really interesting. And I need to honestly do more research as to why that is. Because when you just do a Google search, it tells you like if you smoke or drank during your pregnancy, and that was obviously not the case for me. And so I'm really curious as to why my placenta did look the way it did. But she just like brought it over to me after I delivered it and was like, you want to look at it? And I'm like, okay, sure. So she was like explaining like, look at how it's like calloused here. Anyway, it was very interesting. But after that, honestly, my midwife like kind of just left the room and she was gone. And I really like wanted to thank her. I felt like it all happened so fast. Like you go through something so big together and then you don't see these people again, which I will see her again when I go to my checkups, but it's just crazy. Like you have such an intense experience with these people and then they're just like gone. But anyway, so they placed Oliver then on my chest And the first thing I remember the midwife saying too, she's like, "Oh my gosh, he has your chin," to my husband. And they're like, "Look at how long his feet are and his fingers are so long." And my midwife was like, "Man, your mom hid you well, because I was not expecting you to be this big." So he was 7 pounds, 14 ounces. When we had our 36-week ultrasound, they had said he was about 6.5 pounds. And so we're like, okay, yeah, if you factor about half a pound a week, like that would make sense. But I don't know. I just kind of knew he'd be within that 7-pound range. I didn't expect to really have an 8 to 10 pound baby, but you just really never know, because the ultrasound can be accurate, but it's not always. And so when I delivered him, then yeah, like I said, they checked him out and everything, but mostly they had him on my chest for a long time. And then every 15 minutes they came in to check, they kind of like press on your stomach, which I didn't know was a thing, to just kind of make sure that things maybe were like settled where they're supposed to, or to check on your, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking. Anyway, but they just like press on your stomach. It's really not bad at all, especially after you've had a child. You're like, okay, whatever, like do what you need to do to make sure everything's good with me. And so we just, for about an hour, we're in that room. The nurse was like, "Do you want me to bring you anything?" I'm like, honestly, yeah, some food sounds good. And so they had like a ham sandwich and some chips. And then she's like, "I brought you a slushie too, because I thought that might sound good," which is just so kind. And so I kind of like ate some of that. We sat in that room then for about an hour, and then it was time to transition into the postpartum area. So it's really weird. I just did not expect to be in like 3 different rooms while I was at the hospital, but it is just how it was. So we were in the room to make sure that I was actually like dilated, ready to have a baby. And then we moved to the delivery room, and then we moved into like postpartum recovery area. And so before that though, she kind of helped me go to the bathroom. Obviously there's bleeding happening in that area, so it got me all set up. And then they put me in a wheelchair. Just, I think it's probably protocol. Your legs, I mean, I didn't have an epidural. If you would have an epidural, you would obviously need to be in a wheelchair. For me, I think it was just kind of protocol. Like, you just had a baby, you don't really need to be walking there. And then they loaded all of our other stuff up. And then I just held Oliver all the way to our new room. And so we got to the new room about like 4 a.m. and they give you the spiel. It was our night nurse, and she was obviously going to be off around 7. So she wanted to make sure we knew some things before like we were just left with a child, because it's just kind of gnarly how you have a baby and they're like, "Okay, like here you go." I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's just so bizarre, because while he was laying on my chest in the delivery room, he was ready to like start eating. And so the nurse was like, "Okay, I think you should try seeing like if he's ready to latch." And I was breastfeeding then like briefly, that is just kind of like all honestly a blur. But babies, I feel like don't really have to eat that much within the first like 24 to 48 hours. I was saying, I'm like, we expect so much of them as soon as they come out, right? Of like, okay, now you need to eat and you need to poop and you need to have all these things happen. And I think it's a lot of pressure on their little bodies. So I was like not trying to force anything. Then they brought us into that room. We had some education things that she went over, and then we just honestly went to bed. Oliver slept right beside us in his little bassinet that they have at the hospital. And the first night was pretty tame. They do come in then like every 3 hours to check on him and you. And then the next day I was able to get that IV port out at, I think it was like 12 o'clock p.m. and we got some sleep. The one thing that was really weird that happened is my neck was super stiff and my eyes were bloodshot, and I had some like blood vessels popped by my eyebrows, obviously just from labor, but my neck was so swollen, like you couldn't see my collarbones. And if I like pressed on my neck, it felt kind of like Rice Krispie, like crinkles. And so the nurses were like, "We've never seen that happen before, but I'm going to guess like obviously it's from labor, just maybe don't touch it." They brought me like a hot pack to then have on my neck, but I was not expecting that like type of reaction, and you don't expect like to have, I don't know, your neck be super swollen and like stiff. Honestly, the next day I kind of felt like I had been hit by a car, but I would say majority of it is because my neck situation, that is probably not, I mean, it isn't typical that happens in that area, but I was just very, very sore. But after you're able to take that first shower, so they took out the IV port, and then I was able to take a shower and I got ready. I put on some makeup and did my hair, which obviously is not necessary, but for me, I'm like, I need to feel like a human, because having what I thought was a stomach flu on Monday, being, having contractions all day Tuesday, and then finally having this baby at 2:32 a.m., like I needed to feel like a person. And so I took a shower and just felt so much better. And then we really just hung out in the hospital. We could have been out of there within 24 hours, but we did wait a little bit longer because we thought we would go to like a lactation consultant in town, and then they ended up being booked, which was fine. Truthfully, I've not had any issues with breastfeeding, which has been a blessing. It's all gone very smoothly, but I just didn't know, obviously. So we then got out of there on, would it have been Friday? Yes, it would have been, oh my gosh, Thursday or Friday, whatever, it doesn't matter. The next day then, so we were there all of Wednesday, and then it was Thursday that we then left the hospital, and they had to check out Oliver and make sure that he was fine and like kind of check him out of the hospital, because they put on these little anklets to make sure like nobody can take your baby. It would like alert some different sensors, so that had to be cut off. And then we were supposed to kind of wait for my midwife to come around, but apparently she had come early in the morning when we were sleeping and just kind of discharged me then. And so we hung out for about 6 hours longer than we needed to be at the hospital, which was totally fine. We were able to get a meal and eat there, and I mean, I wasn't in a huge rush. We already were getting out of there a lot faster than I feel like most people do. Like I said, they would have let us leave around 24 hours if we wanted, and then we ended up staying just a little bit longer than that. So yeah, then we headed home. Something that I told Nathan, I'm like, I'm a fraud. Or maybe I was telling my mom, I'm like, I'm a fraud. I have to tell them. I did not bring my own food to the hospital outside of snacks. I saw a question around like snacks to take to the hospital. I would take beef sticks because you probably will not be that hungry when you are in active labor. Even like anything like quick energy wise, like I said, like a fruit leather. I was like, honestly, it didn't sound that good at that point. And I ate it anyway, but then it obviously came back up. So I wouldn't say during labor you need anything, but postpartum, I did bring some beef sticks. I brought my Perfect Aminos, which I would highly, highly recommend. It is a powdered beverage, or like a powder that you put in some water. But what I like about that is it's 30 grams of protein, and it's absorbed within 30 minutes of it entering your system. It's just a really good way to get extra protein without having to actively be eating something. I also brought my energy drops and my recovery drops from Anya, which I highly, highly recommend, along with postpartum multivitamin that also is from the same brand. I really, really love those products, and in full transparency, I've like worked a little bit with them, and I've met the founder of the company, and I've created some content for them. And so they had actually sent me those products to try, but I was really going to purchase them if they wouldn't have sent them to me anyway, just because I trust the brand after meeting the founder. Like, the motive behind the brand is so quality, and my body obviously was depleted and needed nutrients, and I wanted to give it that as soon as possible. Another thing that I brought to the hospital snack wise was Paleo Valley has some superfood like protein bars that I really like. I got the red velvet and then the lemon, it's like a lemon cookie one. And so that was really the extent of the snacks that I took, along with the supplements. But I didn't bring food. I thought that I would bring food with me, like sourdough or something to have, so I didn't have to eat the hospital food. And truthfully, when you get to that point, I just wanted a warm meal. I didn't really care what it was. Still sticking to consuming mostly warm foods to help my body heal and recover. But I just really ate what the hospital provided. I was pleasantly surprised. I did actually work at that hospital a few years ago, and I knew the quality of their food, and so that was why I was kind of a little hesitant to want to eat the hospital food. But Nathan and I both said, we're like, honestly, at that point, like, you just want to eat a warm meal. You don't really care. And we're both pretty impressed with what was available. But I would say bring snacks, because you just don't know what type of snacks they'll have provided. They did have like a little snack area that had some fruit and had some like chips and cookies and crackers. But like, if that's not really what you want and you want more protein rich options, I would say definitely bring that along with you, because they probably won't provide that for you. And they really just provide you then with like those 3 meals. So breakfast came around like, I think 8 or 9, and then noon, and then they had the evening meal, and that's kind of the extent. So please, like, remember to bring snacks, maybe not necessarily full meals like I had said I thought I would do. at that point, like I said, you just are not wanting to have to eat anything that you prepared. You just want a warm meal. And honestly, at that point, I didn't really care what the quality was. I just knew I needed food and I needed warm food, and they were able to provide that. And like I said, we were relatively impressed with the quality of the food. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of these questions. I feel like I kind of shared a lot about it. Like, how long were you at the hospital? We were there from about 9:30 on Tuesday evening until Thursday around like 5. So a little over that 24 hours. And then another question here was, how was your nursing staff? Were they fully on board with you having a natural birth? And yes, they were. And I think a huge contributor of this is they knew I was coming from the birthing center. Having wanted to work with midwives, I obviously was not doing things maybe the more common way. Or traditional way of doing things. I was going through a midwife clinic, and luckily CHI has that as part of their hospital experience. So it's very common for you to work with them and then deliver at CHI St. Elizabeth in Lincoln. If you are from the area or in the area, you obviously would probably know of that hospital. So having them work together, I think, is also what maybe showed that like I wanted things to go that way. And then they probably had nurses with me that were maybe more focused in that realm. At least that's kind of what I would anticipate. I did not feel any pressure from nurses or my midwife to do anything a certain way. I feel like they were very respectful of what I wanted. I was kind of expecting to have to like go over my birth plan with them when we got to the hospital. And honestly, they didn't even look at it, which was totally fine. I think you're kind of told like on social media, you need a birth plan and all of these things listed out that you want to happen. And truthfully, like I would be curious to see how many times that it actually happens that way. And I trusted them. Honestly, after meeting the nurse that we had and my midwife, I had complete trust in what they thought was best for me. And I really trusted them to also do and ask for permission on things that maybe they were unsure of. So I didn't really look at my birth plan once we got to the hospital. It's kind of funny because it was in our bag and everything ready to go. They didn't really look at it. They were very respectful, like I said, of everything that I wanted or didn't want to happen. And they ask you multiple times to like, okay, like, are you sure you don't want to do this? And then you'll say yes. And then there's maybe some paperwork that you have to sign so that they're not liable if you do things a certain way or after the baby is born. But yes, I would say they were all very respectful and very supportive of how I wanted to do things. Another thing here, something that I had found interesting or wasn't expecting, I would say something that I was not expecting was the intensity of contractions changing from 7 to 10 centimeters. I really thought that once I felt the intensity of 7 centimeters dilated, in those contractions, that I would be like, okay, yeah, like we'll get through this, it's fine. But they really did pick up in intensity, obviously because your baby is moving further down. Something along with that too is how sore my hips and my low back were, really starting on Monday when I thought that I had the stomach flu, into Tuesday, and then obviously into Wednesday. But it makes sense looking back now. I had thought like, well, like I'm sick, obviously my body is just really worn down, my back is sore. Like historically, if there's an area in your body that has an injury, that at least for me, that tends to be what gets irritated as soon as I'm sick and my body's trying to fight something off. And so with that intensity of pain, it makes sense. Like obviously the baby was moving further down into my pelvic floor area. At the time, I didn't really recognize that that was what was happening. Another thing too is like, how is your body, or how is recovery going? I really felt like I could have started working out 2 days after I had him. And I'm not. Like, obviously I'm taking that full 6 weeks, 40 days essentially to let my body recover, but I really felt physically very strong during labor and delivery and after. And I would 100% credit that towards eating really well during my pregnancy and also strength training. Literally up until the day that I had him, I exercised on that Sunday before the Monday that I got sick. So I really strength trained as long as I possibly could, knowing that I'm going into a season where walking is about the extent of what I can do. Something I wasn't also expecting is like how your body communicates that you're doing too much. There was a day when we had gotten home, and we actually lost power for over 48 hours shortly after we got home. And so we were at my parents' house, but I was really just like stretching on the floor. And later that evening, not to get TMI, but there was a lot of blood obviously in that region. It's kind of like you get your period pretty heavily for about a week and a half maybe, and then things kind of mellow out. But just like how my body alerted me, like, yeah, physically maybe you feel really strong and really great, but internally there's a lot of healing still happening. And honestly, like being able to see that physically happening, and then also recognize like, yes, maybe on the outside I feel good and I feel strong. Internally, my body still has a lot of healing to do. And so that was kind of my sign to like not be as intense, which again, like you don't think stretching on the floor is intense or going to cause anything to happen, but it really did. And so now I'm kind of just walking. I'm trying to walk about 30 minutes in the morning, and then in the evening, getting outside when we can, or getting on the treadmill to just go for a nice slow walk, about like speed 3.2. That's like a comfortable pace for me to not overdo it, but to feel like I'm still able to move my body, because it's really difficult to go from exercising 6 days a week, strength training, all the things, to then really sitting around a lot more, not doing a lot because you physically can't and shouldn't, and letting your body heal. So about a week after we got home, I started then adding in some walking and making that a priority, because honestly, mentally and physically, I just really feel like I do need that. I do feel like something that we kind of like shame at people for saying is that they want to like bounce back well from their pregnancy. And I don't know, I have mixed feelings, obviously, because you don't want to overdo it and like not honor your body signaling that you need rest, or that you need to not be exercising before maybe that 6-week mark or before you're cleared. But I would be lying if I said I didn't want my body to look similar to how it did before I got pregnant. Like that's just how I am. Obviously I have a history of not always appreciating my body and kind of punishing it in a sense, because I was never content with my physical body. I think when you go through something like delivering a baby, you realize like what your body looks like is truly the most uninteresting thing about you, when you are literally sustaining the life of another person. Like you have to eat a certain amount of food if you're breastfeeding. You really have to also let your body fully heal, because that impacts years and years down the road, impacts your hormones. And so I would be lying if I said I didn't want my body to look how it did before I got pregnant, or even like earlier on. Like I had a memory come up on Facebook from 3 years ago, and I was like, oh wow, like I was pretty jacked. I can say that now, but in the moment I know I still absolutely hated what I looked like. And so it's like finding that balance of not overdoing it because you want to look a certain way, and also understanding you have to eat a certain amount of food if you want to be I shouldn't say if you want to be able to breastfeed, because it's not a requirement, but it can be helpful if you do eat enough calories for your milk supply. So it's kind of that fine line, but I really do feel like my body has recovered very well. I feel very confident right now in what I look like, and it's not something that's really a concern of mine. But again, like I think how you treat your body during pregnancy is a very telling sign of how your body's going to recover after you deliver. And so I just really think like eating well, strength training, resting, sleeping well, having those habits in place that then obviously they don't perfectly transfer after you have a child, because you're up maybe every 2 hours at night. So your sleep isn't as quality, but there's some habits that continue to stick because you've made them habit before you actually had your baby. And I think that's something I just can't encourage you to do enough. Again, if you are looking into having a baby anytime soon, or if you're just interested or intrigued by the whole experience or whatever your situation is. One thing that I guess I didn't ask is, what did you do to relieve contraction pains or help your body relax during labor? Something, like I said, I didn't do an epidural, but something like I said is leaving your tone or having your tone be very low. So rather than like the blood curdling squeals that you would see on a movie of somebody like screaming, that is really not the experience, but you want to keep everything very low, like I don't even want to mimic that, but that's like honestly probably how I sounded, like a low rather than screaming. And that was something that I used to help. I also had done a lot of breath work during pregnancy. So I would do like a 4 count inhale, 6 count exhale. or like I would do a 4-count inhale, hold at the top for 4 seconds, exhale for 6 seconds, do the same thing, inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 8. So a lot of that breath work, like the deep belly breathing, I think was really helpful too. And then, like I said, having my midwife have cloths in that area to like, again, have kind of like that visual of like, this is where I'm pushing the energy towards and trying to like obviously move this baby down further so I can deliver it more efficiently, was also very helpful and helped with any tearing, because I didn't have any tearing or anything happen down there, but it was because, again, I think because she had that cloth there, and it was just a good visual for me, but also physically supported that area so I didn't have too intense of like stretching or pain when he actually was delivered. Okay, let me see here. Really, I think that everything and how it happened how it was supposed to. I really wouldn't change anything about the experience or where I was at. Like I said, I was kind of on the fence, truthfully, about wanting to deliver in a hospital, and I really am happy that we chose to do that, and just like the lack of pressure it put on me or my husband to know what to do. For example, like him swallowing amniotic fluid, I'm obviously like, you're gonna pat their back, but the nurses were so quick into action to make sure they got everything out that they could, and I really just don't see myself wanting that responsibility in the future, and will continue, I shouldn't say with 100% confidence, but would do everything almost the exact same that we did this first time around. A couple more questions here that I wanted to address. The first one was thoughts on vaccines offered directly after birth. Now, vaccines is something, and I was talking to my husband about this, that I feel like is something that like can make or break relationships, and people are very, very set in how they feel one way or another. And this is something, if you wanted to have a conversation one-on-one with me, I would truthfully love to talk about it and talk about what we decided to do for privacy of my child as well. I don't really want to share what we decided to do for him, but what I will say is that you have to really make that decision for yourself, and do the research on both sides, and look at the pamphlets and look at the information on any vaccine that you want to give your child. If you are kind of on the fence, or if you're not sure, or if you just want to have confidence in the decision you make, I think that is something I can't recommend enough. And I did a lot of that, listened to like a lot of podcasts. The Vaccine Friendly Plan was a really highly recommended book for me, and I kind of read through that, or we listened to the audiobook of that briefly, also listened to podcasts from the author of that book. And I would say just making that decision for yourself is going to be the best, because it's a lot of responsibility. Like, you have this baby, this fresh baby, this perfect little human, and you want to just be very aware of what you're putting in their body. And that was something that was very, very important to me. Something that I do want to say though, and this might even be, this should not be controversial. I would say any good pediatrician and any good nurse will not shame you for whatever decision you make, and will do what they can to make sure you have the information to make the best decision for you and your child. We had some questions, and the pediatrician that was just at the hospital doing rounds, we were like, do you have a pamphlet or like an insert that we could look at about that vaccine? And she was like, I don't, but I will go and dig and find one for you. So she actually went down to the pharmacy and got the pamphlet for us so we could look at all the information about it, kind of like the black box label, I think is what they would call it, maybe, if you're like looking into vaccines, so we could truly feel like we were making a good decision one way or another. And that is what I will say, is any good pediatrician or nurse will not shame you or make you feel guilty for doing one thing or something one way or another. They really should just want to provide you with the information, and then you can make that decision for yourself. And so I'd encourage you to just ask questions and ask for more information if you're on the fence. Say, do you have an insert or more information on that vaccine that we can actually look at and see if we want to do this or make this decision for our child? Just because it is a big decision. And I think that is probably the most researched thing that I did. And so like I said, I would be more than happy to tell you what we decided to do, more in like a one-on-one conversation, just because then it's more of a conversation and less of me projecting what I did and what maybe, or influencing your decision on what to do as well. And then this final question here is postpartum depression or balancing the load with your partner. And this is something I've not experienced postpartum depression. I think it would be a really valuable conversation to have, and to have somebody on the podcast that can talk more to that, because that's not been my experience, but I know for a lot of people it is. Something that I will say when it comes to postpartum depression is that's something you are worried about, or if you are experiencing, is to look at how you're fueling your body and look at how your body's being supported emotionally with the people around you. I think when I have seen postpartum depression occur, sometimes there is like a gut microbiome issue, or there is a nutrient deficiency that's not being addressed, that is causing those emotions to be even more intense, or there could be a lack of support with your spouse, or even with your family. And if that's something that you really need, but it's hard to ask for it, maybe even before you deliver, having that conversation with your spouse and saying like, hey, like I'm really worried that I might have these intense emotions. Can you provide meals for us for the first weekend that we're at home? And I think asking for help is a really healthy way to kind of work through that. But again, I can't speak to that because I'm not experiencing that. But I know something that was super helpful is my mom provided meals for us for the first weekend that we were home. So we didn't have to think about that and worry about that. And my husband was able to have 2 weeks off, and then he's going back to work and then taking another almost 2 months off, just because his work allows him to do that, which is something I know is very uncommon, sadly, that I'm super grateful for, is that I've been able to have his support for 2 weeks after actually delivering. And so that has made it a lot easier, I think, to be into this season, or kind of transition into this. Not obviously, both of us don't really know exactly what to do all the time, but what's nice is I'll get up every 2 hours to feed him. But if it's in between that 2 hours and Oliver truthfully doesn't need anything from me, then Nathan will get up with him, or he'll get up with him in the morning, and then I'll sleep for 2 hours, and he'll just kind of take care of him. So it is just really nice to have that communication and just have somebody that can support you, even if it's not, if you're doing things on your own and it would be more of like your parents. I think that is just where asking for help can be so big. And when you're not asking for help, or when you are not, honestly, I think a big piece too is like taking time for yourself and recognizing that is not selfish. There's even sometimes like going for a walk. I'll tell Nathan, like, do you want to go for a run, or is it okay if I go for a 30-minute walk? 30 minutes feels like a good time for me to take for myself, to just go for a walk and get away for a little bit. Not that obviously I like need to get away, because I love being a mom and all the things that have come with it, but you still need things for yourself. And I think that can be so, maybe, I don't know, if it's shame, like if moms feel shame or guilt around that of not doing something for themselves. But I know for me, movement has consistently been something that has made me feel so good physically and mentally. And I had even said before I had our baby, I was like, I need to still prioritize exercise. Like that is still something that I will be taking 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour for myself, 6 days a week when I can, because that is what is so valuable to me. So that is just something I would say, is make sure you have support, still find time to do things for yourself, and look at like the health of your gut and how you're feeding your body, and any nutrient deficiencies you might have postpartum that are obviously being taken from you if you're breastfeeding, or hormonal fluctuations as well that need some support. All right, so that was kind of the extent of the questions. If there was something you had asked that you didn't feel like you got answered, of course, you can always message me. But there's so many pregnant moms that follow me and listen to the podcast, which is just so fun to have people that are also in the season of life with you. And hopefully you found this interesting. I really think for me, it's honestly something I want to be able to go back and listen to, having kind of all the nitty-gritty details. For not, I'm going to assume for most people, or some people, this wasn't everybody's cup of tea. But again, I think it's something that'll be fun to go back and listen to in the future, and just remember the experience through the podcast. So if you have not, be sure to leave either a rating, 5-star rating, or review on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Like I said, I will not be filming the podcast for a while. We're just going to do strictly audio, but I'm totally okay with that. I really just needed an outlet like this, and I'm really grateful that you are here every week listening. So thank you so much for that. If you're interested in following along with my life outside of the podcast, you can find me at Nourish with Bailey on Instagram. That is definitely where I am the most active, but I'm trying to be less active on there now and just enjoy this time with my family. So not necessarily posting a lot on there, but if you message me, and you will get probably an automated response, I will probably get back to you. I'm not going to put a time frame on it, but I do want to answer any questions if you have any for me that either I didn't talk about on the podcast specifically, or if you are in kind of entering into the season of life and just need some support, of course, don't hesitate to reach out to me either. You can also find my email in the description of today's episode. But with that, I'll talk to you again next Wednesday. Bye.